incident was about to take place that would shake the foundations of the civilized world.
It is time to open your mind. Time to discover your divine self as we navigate this holographic matrix together. Strap in, cosmic family, as we slide through this wormhole of cosmic information together in search of the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
It's time to go inside the matrix. With your host, Jimmy Brent.
All right, welcome to Inside the Matrix, everybody. Hope you're holding up well in spite of the craziness that we are still experiencing. My guest today, we're bringing back Alexandra Bruce. She's a producer, director, writer, author, expert researcher, and her website is forbiddenknowledgetv.net, and she puts out so much good information, and she's a super sleuth out there and has the world's best memes. So, Alexandra, welcome back.
It's great to be back. Thank you, Jimmy.
So happy to have you here again. There's just, I don't even know where to begin today because the absurdity of what we're seeing is just almost beyond belief. We've heard so many people talk about this kind of a scenario happening, but I think most of us thought, well, yeah, maybe in 20 years, maybe not. And now it's right in our face. So
it was 20 years ago that we thought that.
Yeah, right. And here we go. It's right here now. So I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of throw in your 2 cents now and what you think we're experiencing. What is this all about?
Well, to get down to the most naked bare bones of this situation, it really has to do with the people who control the monetary supply of the world.
Mm-hmm. As usual.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but this is, I don't think that they've ever been directly challenged like this for so long. I mean, JFK, and even Trump doesn't mention them by name.
Right.
And I think that's one of the most frustrating parts of all this, because he is kind of a plain talker most of the time, except for certain areas which really do relate to the families. I don't know what you want to call them, the families, to the the death cult, whatever.
Yeah, that's probably a better term for him.
So because of all the normies out there who've been successfully brainwashed, he can't just come out and say, listen, we're at war with like the death cult that controls the planet right now.
You're right.
It'll look crazy.
Although we would love that. Because we know the truth of it. But yeah, you're right. Most people, if they hear that, they're just going to think, oh, this guy has lost his marbles, because they are so far away from, really comprehending where we're at with all this stuff. And those of us who have been in this for so many years, it's very commonplace and natural for us to use those terms, because that, we're calling it what it is.
Well, not only that, I mean, it's by their fruits ye shall know them. So you can spot their agents and their voice everywhere. And like I've said this before, the whole way that they are is they're monopolistic in the way that they operate. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the stuff that you'll see coming from the Chinese Communist Party, which oftentimes you'll really see coming from CNN, is really coming from them, because China was built up and created by them, okay?
Yep.
Using us to do it, and our greedy, corporations and investors, to divest ourselves of our manufacturing base and of our intellectual property, and just trillions and trillions of of value has been exported, has been relocated in China. And so the thing is, it's not really about the Chinese people, and I almost don't even want to say that it's the Communist Party, although it really is. It's them. It's the death cult who have empowered them, and of which the Chinese Communist Party has become their agent. Okay, the same way that, by the way, the U.S. military became, the military-industrial complex was their agent through, most of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
It's like to the point where it became such a foreign concept that our military should exist to actually defend our borders in our own country.
Imagine that.
Yeah, right. Of all things, right? In that we really got sort of programmed and used to the idea that, we just go fight these wars for things that we don't even care about and that really have, no bearing on our, how we feel about anything. It's so, like, do we really have a beef with Iraq? Did Iraq have anything to do with 9/11?
Nope.
Nope. So
yeah, that was just bizarre experiment there too with propaganda. When you repeat it enough times, people begin to see it as actually being true, and that they've learned their lessons well from our friend Bernard or Edward Bernays. I can't want to call him Bernard. Edward Bernays, who wrote the book Propaganda. And they really use that technique and those techniques rather well. China is actually the model, it seems to me, that they want to impose in the world.
This has to do with the technological revolution that we're in right now, because it's data is the new money, and in order to really do that, you need to have a total surveillance state where all that surveillance data is being monetized and leveraged in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what what we have here, but it's illegal, right? What the NSA does is unconstitutional. It's not. So they want to get rid of the Constitution and make it, some would argue, so then what's the freaking difference? And if we have it, but that's why all this thing with the 302s and the FISA warrants and all that, they're making a big deal out of that, because that's going back to, rule of law and things that we value as, in Western civilization.
Absolutely. And what people are not getting right now is that these emergency declarations do not supersede or override our Constitution at all. Right. And I'm so excited when I see some of these sheriffs and even police officers are doing videos now, and they're saying, hey, we're not going to enforce this stuff because this is trampling on our rights. And they recognize that. Now, I just love that. And of course, Sheriff Mack is really been great in that area as well. I think your point is well taken with facial recognition, all of these things. The Chinese seem to be perfectly fine with all this stuff from what I've seen. Of course, not being there, it may be a different story, but the public story is that they don't mind being spied upon 24/7.
Well, because they haven't had decades of law enforcement the way, Western societies have. Rule of law and court. And I mean, they have court and things like that, but at the end of the day, they kind of don't trust their fellow man, because a lot of the people, although Chinese civilization is incredible, I've been there, I think it's amazing, I love China, I love the Chinese people, it's not about these things, it's about the fact that it's a vast country with, a couple of billion people, and a lot of them, until very recently, until a couple of decades ago, were really almost living in a Neolithic lifestyle. Even if their culture is ancient, their technology was very low tech.
Right.
And so I think that when you're really kind of more exposed to the elements from a lack of technology like that, there is a little bit of a more dog eat dog kind of thing that prevails. And so, the people are kind of like, they're like hayseeds, they're kind of like, they're not very civilized in the modern way of life. Okay. They might be civilized in other ways, but not in the modern sense that we think of as modern.
Right.
And so they kind of would like to, there's a lot of fraud that goes on in China. There's a lot of black market because everything is so controlled. There's a lot of black market stuff that goes on. And so there's a lot of fraud. And so people, are victims of that, and they want more policing and law and order. And since they didn't go through the step that we did, they can make this, quantum leap because of the surveillance technology that exists.
Mm-hmm. one thing that really jumped out at me recently is that this exact scenario that we're witnessing, with the plandemic, the scamdemic, whatever you want to call it. There is a paper written by the Rockefeller Foundation in 2010. And people can look this up and find the PDF and download it. I know I found it rather easily. It's called Scenarios for the Future Technology and International Development. And it's a 54-page document, and there's some really nasty stuff in there. And they refer to it as an academic scenario. There's just like, we're just kind of just throwing out some ideas there. When in fact, what we're seeing is very close to what they actually describe here. And one of the things, yeah.
I ran a video about it. Dana Ashley did a very good job.
Oh, she did. Yeah. And she's wonderful. And they've really, taken down a lot of her videos as of late as well.
And so, one of the chapters of that paper was called Lockstep. And that refers to, the lockstep behavior. I mean, we're seeing it that basically all over the world. The reason why, Trump couldn't really keep on saying that it was a hoax was because the whole planet was going to do it. And then he would really just look crazy.
Right.
So, but what you find in the United States is that, and what's fascinating is that there's a complete 100% mirror of this going on in Brazil right now, where, the tropical Trump, who's like been read into the whole Trump program, right? So he's trying to do what Trump is doing in Brazil.
Oh.
And there, Brazil was a very left-wing country for a long time. And some people are really sick of it because of all the incredible corruption that comes with socialism.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people get it, but a lot of people are still, they want transgender bathrooms and, everything. Let me go back to that. And but what's fascinating is that it's the lower level authorities, just like here in the United States, the governors and the mayors, that are refusing to reopen the economy.
Yeah, because they're profiting from the old system.
Well, what they also want to do is to get rid of him the same way that, the deep state wants to get rid of. It's the same deep state everywhere, all over the planet, okay? So
yeah, but they've got these scams going where they're making tons of money, siphoning off the people. Mm-hmm. And so a guy like Trump comes along, or the new guy in Brazil, mm-hmm. and they're raining on their parade. And that's why they've just pulled out all the stops to bring them down, right?
Yeah. And so here they'll bankrupt and completely disrupt. I just don't see how, they ever expect to be voted in again. And so I don't know sometimes if they really have a choice, because they're only there because they agreed to do what they were told, and they're doing what they're told, but it's going to get them fired, hopefully,
Yeah.
People aren't totally brainwashed, but, it's not like we didn't have a foreshadowing of this when Bill Maher said, I hope that the stock market crashes so that we can get rid of Trump. That was like 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, and my understanding is that the Democrats are, and just to be clear, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I believe in freedom and the Constitution, and probably closer to a libertarian than anything else. But so when I talk about the Democrats, it just appears that there's a bunch more of them that are pushing this whole globalist agenda and ripping off the people than anybody else. And they are trying to prolong this whole scenario as long as they can, because that definitely gives them much more leverage to, go after Trump and accuse him of all these things that he really had very little to do with. And again, I'm not a big Trump supporter in every way. There's a lot of things I disagree with him on. But as far as, when he talks about doing something with the central bank, when he talks about, choice in what we have and upholding constitutional things, I'm all for that.
Well, I think that it's it boils down to whether you want the New World Order and the death cult to succeed in doing their genocidal, agenda, or whether you want the Constitution. And so there really is no choice, and it's not really about liking or not liking Trump, but he stands for that side. He stands for the constitutional side and not for the New World Order side. And so it's very simple. It's not about liking or not liking him.
Right.
Personally, I think that he does have huge personality issues. I think that he is borderline autistic, and that's why his speech patterns are so bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I think that that's a big part of what they're able to seize upon and to really just make it all be about Orange Man bad all the time.
Yeah. And one thing that's impressive to me, though, is when you see 90% of the mainstream media just going after him in every way, shape, and possibility to try and bring him down. That says a lot right there. And
it does. And so it's weird. Like, how can anyone think that we're looking at the news? Like, how?
Yeah.
I don't, because it's just so disturbing that, we really are in the middle of a civil war that's being waged by the deep state, who control the media, who think that they can control what you think with their strident and seditious behavior.
Yeah.
It's upsetting. It's really upsetting to have the people who are supposed to be giving you information that's valuable to you to help you navigate the world, and it's just about overthrowing your government all the time.
Yeah, it's just nonstop. And I really think this is, ultimately a spiritual war, what we're seeing going on. This is the death cult against us, right? This is, when you think about how we're being attacked in every way possible, we're being poisoned constantly, from the air with the chemtrails, from the water with the fluoride and the chlorine and all these different chemicals in our water. You got the glyphosate and all these other additives in our food. You've got vaccines, you've got petrochemical drugs. All of these things are being thrown at us, to try and weaken us, to try and weaken our spirit. And in the school system, dumbing us down. This is literally a war, a spiritual war, good against evil. And people need to see it for what it is. These are different, we're talking about these scenarios. These are different aspects of a bigger war. They want to divide us, because dividing people always is beneficial for them. Because if they can get us fighting amongst ourselves all the time, back and forth, then that takes the heat off of them. But we need to see things for what they are. And I'm so excited to see it when people are catching on. And I think a lot more people are catching on as, these events unfold. And just like 9/11.
All it took was for them to shut down the global economy, for a fraction to start waking up.
Hello. Yeah. It's like, hit somebody over the head with a 2x4. 9/11 was a big 2x4. This is a 4x4.
Yeah.
Over the head. Say, okay, what's really going on here? So a lot of people are going to have to stop and think where they never really wanted to before. It's very easy to just turn on the news and go, oh, yeah, okay, that's what's happening. And no, it's not. Realize that these are propaganda machines, and a lot more people are realizing that. And while I'm thinking about it, if anybody in the chat has got a question for Alexandra or wants to talk about a certain subject, feel free to pop it in the chat or give us a call. And we're always happy to engage with our listeners, because we have some really smart people out there as well.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. The only way I see getting out of this is, cutting off the head of the snake. And what does that mean? That means, there are so many more. There are billions of us, and maybe a few thousand of them. And I'm talking about the controlling families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and their tools, to me, there's two things that are major tools that they're very effective in their ability to control us. One is that we've got enough people who are willing to sell out, who are willing to, for money and fame and fortune, who are willing to sell their souls to sell out the rest of humanity and work for them. That's the number one. We see that in politics. We see that in all kinds of media.
That cannot go unnoticed. Is this sort of innate human greed?
Right.
That's how. In fact, that's how they can just set things up so that greed can run amok, and it works in their favor.
Yeah, and the other one is just the ability to program humans. Humans, if your consciousness is not to a certain level where you see the game, humans are very susceptible to programming. And this has been proven over and over and over again. I mean, the extremes would be like, MK Ultra type programming. But what we're seeing in mainstream media is absolutely programming as well. And many people buy into it. And the proof of that is, if nobody told you there was this pandemic going on, everybody would have gone about their business the same way. We probably would have had, similar, deaths like a regular flu season, and there wouldn't have been any big deal. But the media told everybody, freak out, we're going to all die. It's 2 million, 3 million people are going to die. Stay in your house, put on your masks, social distance. This was all programming, and people that aren't aware of how this is done are very susceptible to it.
That's right.
And it worked rather well. And that's the scary part to me is that, the governor of South Dakota, I really loved what she had to say about it. She did not shut down her state. And she said that she was really disappointed in how easily and quickly people were willing to give up their liberties for this.
To say nothing of their businesses and,
Yeah, their livelihoods. I mean, okay, well, I'll just kill my business so that, I won't get COVID or.
Right.
It's just, it's amazing. It's amazing. And I'm sure that the death cult is, just wringing their hands and just smiling at the cooperation they're getting. And, we're getting some pushback, but we've got to do a lot more. We've got to talk with people. We've got to share information and use as much of social media as we can. We've got to be, if you can do nothing else, at least be a digital warrior. Don't waste your time trying to argue with people who, are, watching the nightly news and think they are informed. Because a lot of them it'll just fall on deaf ears. But for people who are curious and want to know something, if you understand this the way we do, share with them.
Which gets harder and harder. I was in Facebook jail for 24 hours.
Oh, you bad girl, you.
The picture that it was just funny. It was a poor guy who was, I guess he was naked and he sat on one of those plastic, kind of bistro chairs. Uh-huh. And his balls fell through the slit and he got trapped. And so I just thought, I've never seen anything like that. So I posted it. And they said it was like a sexual image and whatever. And so I've never posted anything like that. It was just kind of like, I've never seen anything quite like this.
All right, Alexandra, that's funny. Well, we're going to take a short pause right here, our first break of the show. We're here with Alexandra Bruce. You're listening to Inside the Matrix. We'll be back in just a little bit. All right, welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Inside the Matrix with our special guest, Alexandra Bruce. On the break there, we were talking about the incredible media hype that has surrounded this whole thing and made it seem like they're just people dying everywhere, bodies stacking up. But when you actually look at what's going on in a lot of these hospitals, they're closing because they have nothing going on. They're laying people off. Jason Goodman did some videos in New York City at these hospitals that they were referring to that were just so incredibly busy and they couldn't keep up with the death tolls. And, he did videos there and the emergency rooms were empty.
That's right.
It's amazing, the lying that's going on. And
I think even the refrigerated trucks that they were supposedly, I think that was staged too. And even digging the graves on one of those. Oh yeah, yeah. East River, that was just staged. There's actually been a dip in deaths. There's been decrease in deaths that would have been occurring.
And of course, nobody's dying of heart attacks, cancer, diabetes, or anything else right now. If you die and there's a flake of skin on you, it's probably COVID. So that's going to be the what's put on your death certificate. And then you've got all these nurses making TikTok videos.
Right.
I mean, come on. We're in the middle of this supposed pandemic, and they've got plenty of time to do choreography and, oh, please. It's just ridiculous.
I wonder if those are real, too. Like, it's just kind of astounding that they can get away with that. I wonder if they're not staged, because we were mentioning in the break, the opening ceremonies at the 2012 Olympic Games in London had scenes that were very similar to these TikTok videos on a grand scale. And even the helicopter shot, the overhead of the stadium, they had arranged the lights in the ring, in the circle of the top of the stadium to look like a coronavirus.
They tell us in advance, right?
Exactly. Predictive programming.
For sure. And now the result, and this goes back to that Scenarios for the Future Technology and International Development from Rockefeller Foundation. Part of what they're trying to accomplish here is consolidation in many areas. Like, for instance, a lot of these community hospitals are literally laying doctors and nurses off and going out of business because they've been instructed that they can only take care of this pandemic. All of the elective surgeries and things like that have been canceled, and they're going out of business. Same with a lot of small businesses, mom and pop shops. They're all going out of business. So part of that agenda is to make sure that big box stores, or like Walmart, Amazon, all those corporations are going to thrive and basically gobble up the business. And the big hospital corporations will then gobble up these community hospitals that are going out of business at pennies on the dollar.
Yeah. It's really perverted. And as someone like Alex Jones keeps saying all the time, it's really the people in third world countries who are going to feel this the most at the end of the day. It hasn't, the effects haven't been felt by everybody. It certainly has been felt by people who've been forced out of work in the country and all over, but in all the food that's getting thrown away is not going to get to the people who don't make their own food, and that's something America does, is feed a lot of the world beside itself. And
true. And the
UN has already predicted that I've heard two figures, 130 million, and now I've heard 250 million people will starve in 2020 because of this.
And the cure being worse than the affliction, right?
Much worse. So it's just very perverted, and it really it's showing the power of all of those compromised people, globalists that are in power all over the world.
And you can tell because of the uniformity of reaction, not only in the press but with these governments, that this was absolutely planned and executed, just as if, okay, they got their orders, we're going to do this, we're going to impose our power on the people and do this grand simulation experiment, and we're going to see, like you were saying before, we're going to see who the sheeple are and who people are that aren't going to buy this whole scenario.
And sometimes it really takes the first people who are willing to stick their neck out. Trump can't do this all for us. We have to do this. You just don't, freedom, isn't just handed to you on a silver platter, unfortunately. That's
right. It takes, responsibility of all of us individuals to be vigilant in keeping our own freedom. And this has really brought that home to us big time. Yeah. We're going to be forced to stand up or lose everything. Mm-hmm. And it nobody ever wanted it to come to this, but they are calling our hand at this point. And we can.
I think it got escalated to this point because of Trump, because he, is the first person really since, in a major way, since JFK that has ever challenged them.
Yes, I agree. And I think also too is that there was a considerable demonstrations and riots in different parts of the world that they definitely wanted to put a stop to, which they have, like Hong Kong. There was huge demonstrations in France, in Italy, Germany, lots of places that were, people are just getting sick and tired of the crap that has been thrown at us, and that is all stopped now,
Right. Well, the thing with Europe, unfortunately, is that the New World Order has advanced so much further there.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you see, they recently did a thing, it's the person whose broadcast was it? It was Amazing Polly.
Oh, I love her.
She's great. She was saying that because it had, the president of South Africa or the prime minister, I'm forgetting which, but authorities, the leading, authorities from all these governments all over the world, from Portugal, from, every European country, etc. And she says, it looks like they're reading hostage notes,
Exactly. And they were all worded almost identically, right?
Yeah.
So I want to remind people there's a couple of really good sources besides Alexandra, and I would say get on her email list, forbiddenknowledgetv.net. So just, subscribe to her email list and you will get so much great information. But there's also Amazing Polly on YouTube, and there's the Corbett Report. And there's a website as well as YouTube channel, Corbett Report. He just did 2 really great videos on Bill Gates. The first one was called How Bill Gates Monopolized Global Health, and the second one was called Bill Gates' Plan to Vaccinate the World. And he's got another one, in the works too. He is an excellent researcher, does a lot of great documentaries, and very knowledgeable like yourself, Alexandra.
Right, and he is he really sticks to the straight and narrow. He doesn't go into speculation, He
right. Yeah, like me too. Yeah, and that's the thing that's good for a lot of people who are very, they've been conditioned to be very suspicious of anything that disagrees with the mainstream narrative. So for somebody like him, he's very well spoken, and he puts these together with their actual documents and proof. So it's wonderful to see that.
So he's been around for a long time, for like almost 10 years, I think. But
I think he started in 2008. He's great.
So yeah, for a long time. But there are new people that are coming up that are fantastic, like Spiros Skouras.
Yes. Formerly of Newsbud, right?
Right, exactly. And that's Skouras. And this first name is Spiro, Spiro. He's lovely. He's a lovely young man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's doing great work too. And also another one I'll recommend to people is voxnews.com.
Okay, I hadn't heard. I don't know that I had heard about them. Maybe I have.
Yeah, I'll send you a link. It's not vox.com.
Right. Okay, because this is another thing that really gets my goat. As somebody who myself was a hipster, from New York, I directed rap videos for a decade.
Yeah.
Like total funky fresh,
Mm-hmm.
person. What has really, and who also used to, was a contributor to one of these funky websites was called disinfo.com, and I'm talking about back in the early 90s, or, mid 90s. To see sites like vox.com, and what's the other one that was, there's so many of them, basically Daily Beast, a lot of these websites have existed since the 90s, and they were kind of, they really were like, kind of the rebel media in a way back then.
Yeah, they shifted, didn't they?
Well, they've all become, and so this is the thing we were talking about, Republican, Democrat, and all that. It's not really about a political party. It's about whether it is And it's really just by their fruits ye shall know them. Are
Yes.
they about this globalist super state where they get rid of the Constitution and you don't really have rights anymore, and everything becomes like China worldwide? Or is it, does it stand up for the things that we unfortunately started to take for granted, which is the Constitution and our rights?
Right.
And it really boils down to that. And I think people are so blinded by the Orange Man bad thing that they can't see it.
Yeah, it's
So
sad
yeah,
to see.
that's really, to see like these hipster websites to turn into like these raging mouthpieces for the CCP and for, it's pretty terrifying. It's really sad. It's sad, but that's just, I guess there's a cycle to everything, and they sold out.
Yeah, and speaking of buying influence, we know the big banks have always done this, and China has definitely invested heavily into media, into Hollywood, into all aspects of our lives, and pushing their model into us.
Well, if you see the tweets that CNN does, half of them were paid for by the Communist Party. It's incredible. They're just saying China handled the epidemic much better than in the United States. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you even allowed? Like, how can you have a broadcasting license? Like, what is going on here?
The China News Network. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's just, what can you say? It's just so beyond belief, to those of us who can see it. It's just amazing.
It is. It's surreal. Where that's another thing that's up so often throughout these past 3 years is that, like, the divide between, people who can and can't see something. Like, when you see it, you're like, is that not a parody? Like with like the China News, like the CNN tweeting CCP propaganda. Like, you're like, is that a joke? Or is that real?
And then when you realize they're serious, it's like, what?
Exactly. It looks like, is that like the Babylon Bee, or is that CNN for real? It's like that all day long for me,
I know. Okay, here's one that cracked me up, and I'm sure you probably saw it too, is that in Tanzania, they ordered a bunch of COVID tests.
Yeah.
And they decided that they were going to, check it out. So they took some of these tests and they tested a goat and a couple of different kinds of fruit. And they put names on them as if they were people,
Right.
I didn't even know what African names sound like, but, they 3 names, 3 different ages, or 4 or whatever it was. And they sent it in for testing, and they all came back positive.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you about the testing? And then it's even worse than that, because they have not, there's so many doctors talking about this now, really high credentialed scientific doctors who are explaining to us that they don't even have a test for a virus. They haven't even isolated what they're calling, COVID-19 virus, because there's so many different coronaviruses. And then there's the whole, germ theory. So many, doctors and scientists are saying now that that's completely incorrect, that the body produces many viruses, and they're just cell fragments in a way of detoxing. So
Right.
The whole idea that you can catch these viruses is very much in question. And I'm inclined to believe that this whole thing is a complete scam, just to not only vaccinate the world, but to create money while they're poisoning us. And we see it in every aspect. Same with the pharmaceutical drugs, the petrochemical drugs. People don't understand a lot of this. It goes back to big oil.
Yeah.
And, creating synthetic drugs from petrochemicals. We're talking about oil here. And so, they create the problems. They offer us the solution, which will get them what they want, Hegelian dialectic,
Mm-hmm.
and then they profit from it in the end. And it's the same thing over and over, but now they've jumped up the scale. They've amped it up,
Well, they're using the censorship is really It's really disturbing. And, 3 years ago when it first started happening to me, when I was deplatformed or demonetized by Google AdSense, the advertising arm for publishers. Google Ads is when you're buying ads, and when you're displaying them, it's called Google AdSense. And I was one of the first people to just get sort of deplatformed from that. In less words than that, because they didn't even acknowledge it. They just stopped paying me for the space that they'd been paying me thousands and thousands of dollars per month for 5 years previously.
Nice.
But I must have published something that somebody saw and didn't like, and they just turned off my chip, as Aaron Russo would have said. And everyone thought that I was just a screaming lunatic and didn't know what I was talking about. But I think now everybody has had an experience of where they're in the middle of watching a YouTube video and it gets deplatformed in the middle of streaming it.
Oh, I got one for you. I tried to upload the first video that you come to on voxnews.com twice, and I even changed the title just to check it out. It didn't even make it to a draft stage. I got an error message saying this violates our community standards. It didn't even get fully processed before they already gave me the message. I've never seen that before. Wow. That's how there's certain ones I'm sure that they've already coded with AI. So if you see this video coming through, it doesn't matter what it's called.
Pattern of the file. If you haven't added seconds on to the beginning and the end or altered it in any way, they recognize the file.
Yep. And they just automatically will not allow it to be uploaded.
Yeah.
Now, the good side of that is you always know when you're on target when they want to censor you.
Well, I mean, it's on target that you can't talk about hydroxyquinone, which has been totally suppressed. The NIH published a report. They did a study in 2005 after the SARS outbreak and found, which, the COVID-19 is basically SARS-2, okay?
Right.
It's the next iteration of SARS. And which is basically, it's the common cold, it's basically it's maybe a little more weaponized common cold. And they found that a certain amount, I'm forgetting, what the dosage is, obliterated the virus. Boom. And that's why you see these stories of people who are they're dying and they're about to die, and they take the hydroxyquinone and within 2 hours, their symptoms are gone.
Yeah, and lots of people have talked about that. And there was one state representative in Michigan. This black lady got on. She was on national networks, and she said, "You know what? I'm so glad that Trump talked about hydroxychloroquine, I guess it's called, and she took it. She was really sick, and within hours, she said she felt, and the next day she was fine."
Right.
And of course, they just crucified her. I mean, they just went after her.
Congressperson, I forgot it's the local, if it's the local Michigan state one, or if she's a congressperson from Michigan. She was censured by the Democrat Party in Michigan.
Yeah.
For saying anything positive about Trump.
Exactly. And that just is mind blowing. These people
it's literally pennies per dose. You can cure yourself for less than $1. You can cure yourself of COVID-19 for 50 cents.
Alexandra, we can't have that. We can't have reasonably priced remedies here. We've got to make thousands and millions and billions off the misery of people, don't you think?
Oh yeah.
That's their mindset.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've got a question from the chat. Robert is asking, what does your guest think about mandatory vaccines? How or could they even implement it with so many waking up? Could that create a civil war in the U.S. if they tried to link the vaccine to being able to go out in public or work?
Well, of course, I'm totally against not just mandatory vaccines, but pretty much all vaccines.
Any vaccine, yeah, me too.
I'm an anti-vaxxer. Okay,
me
Luckily,
too.
I only had to take 3 when I was little, And I wasn't woke enough to know, back in, I think, 2013 when I had one for tetanus. But I don't know that Trump will allow forced vaccines, but I'm wondering under what circumstances they could be forced. Again, I think it is a states issue. These questions are their local states issues.
Well, I don't think I don't see how anybody can possibly justify that as being in any way constitutional to force somebody. That was just like, with Obamacare, and they wanted to force us into getting this expensive health insurance. And the only way they could, quasi pass it off was to call it a tax. Yeah. So, it's absurd. And the fact that they're parading, criminal psychopaths like Bill Gates, who is, he should be tried for crimes against humanity. And he's on the news constantly talking about this crap. He has no credentials for anything. It's about, generating money for big pharma. It's about controlling world populations. His father was a eugenicist, and he's a eugenicist, and he wants to just take out a big chunk of the world population.
Well, not only that, I think it's even crazier and worse than that. He's a controlled pedophile.
Yeah.
I guess we can pick that up on the other side of the break, but I have a crazy story about that.
Yeah, hold that thought, because I definitely want to get into this guy, because all of a sudden he's the poster boy for everything. He's got all the answers. He's bought into the news media. He's bought into vaccine companies. He's bought into all these, the WHO, you name it, CDC. Anyway, we're going to take another pause here, listening to Inside the Matrix with our guest, Alexandra Bruce. We'll be right back. Stick around with us. Alrighty, welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Inside the Matrix with our special guest, Alexandra Bruce. And before the break, we were kind of touching on Mr. Bill Gates, international criminal.
It's just amazing. Like when you hear the way he talks and his body language, this is a guy who has self-worth issues. I don't think he likes himself very much. And
I think there's questionable gender issues too.
Potentially with the wife. But anyway, actually, it's really weird, the accelerated aging, because there are they've been running footage of him at the age of 45 looking like he's maybe like 17,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The antitrust case that he had back in like 1999 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And because he's not really even that old, he's like 64, but he looks like he's 87.
Yeah, he's really aged badly.
Yeah, all of a sudden, because he was kind of like undeveloped. He was like an elf. He was like an impish boy, until his 60s, and then boom, like fell off a cliff of aging. Michael Chertoff was the guy's name, right?
Yep.
Head of TSA or head of Homeland Security. But okay, so here's the crazy story. Here's the rumor mill going.
Let's go.
All right. So a friend of mine she's a chiropractor, and
okay.
She likes astrology or whatever. So she, listens to a lot of YouTubers who give astrological and tarot readings or whatever. And this is one girl who is from Seattle who's been doing this for a long time, astrologer. And she said, back in 2002, my roommate was a paralegal, in Seattle, and she was working at a firm that was representing this IT guy who had been working for Microsoft at Microsoft headquarters. And that he had actually been in charge of updating Bill Gates' computer. And while he was in the middle of, with their horrible software that they have, right? So while he's in the middle of doing that, he can't help but notice that not only is there a massive amount of child pornography on his computer, that there was a massive child pornography trading network at Microsoft headquarters.
Oh, my God.
And so we've seen this also at the Pentagon, remember?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And what I've heard, incredible statistics that, something like 90% of all internet traffic is porn, and that 50% of porn is child porn.
Ah, disgusting.
So anyway, so then, fast forward from 2002 to 2014, when an engineer, software engineer, who's staying at the Gates compound gets arrested for having child pornography on the Gates compound's computer network. I mean, does lightning strike twice 12 years later?
No, we're just it's just unveiling another pedo out there.
Right. So, nothing happened the first time, and the second time only the engineer got in trouble. But I just have to think, there's no way that you would even dare to have child porn on your computer if you're working for Bill Gates, to have that anywhere near the vicinity of his home's computer network.
Well, of course, but we're seeing all of that come out now with Hollywood and all of these.
Right.
I mean, Clinton. It's Anthony Weiner. It's just all over the place, and it's so disgusting.
This is what we're coming on the anniversary of Isaac Cappy's death.
I saw that you put out today. Yeah, tell everybody about that.
Well, so this is what he says, and so he was an actor who didn't, he's from New Mexico. He's not from some fancy family that grew up sacrificing babies or anything. He didn't know anything about this stuff, and he suddenly, it was unavoidable, and because he was confronted, because Seth Green, who was a good friend of his, said, we have to talk about, what was the word? Chicken. That's what the word he used. And so what he basically said is that it's not even that all of these people and that 50% of the porn traffic is child porn because there are that many pedophiles out there. It's because this is the currency for control. And people agree to submit to, what's the worst thing? If you had child porn on your computer, what would happen to you? You'd go to jail.
Right.
If I did, I'd go to jail. So it's an incredibly powerful way to control people and to keep their mouths shut. And so if you want to make that Faustian bargain and become part of the in crowd and be, a successful comedian or whatever,
in the death cult.
You'd be part of the death cult. So then you will commit some kind of pedophilic sex act on camera to have them be able to blackmail you and control you. And that's why that's why it was just so bizarre. Like, President Trump gets elected, and all of a sudden all the late night comedy guys are turning into, like, it's all anti-Trump all the time. It's very obvious that this isn't just about, like, why wouldn't you be doing this about W, who took us into war and killed 1 million people for no good reason? Did Trump do that? No. So, like, why do people hate Trump so much and don't really say anything about W?
Or Obama.
Or Obama, for that matter. Yeah, Obama dropped more bombs than any other president in U.S. history.
Yeah, but, we can't talk about that because he didn't have any scandals in his entire presidency.
Well, that's all about to change. That's all about to change, I think.
Yeah. Well, there's just so many of them. They just didn't get publicized.
If you pay attention to the Q stuff, it's just been a lot about Obama. A lot about Obama for the past 2 weeks. And some people are theorizing that the first big boom, as far as, we've been waiting for 3 years for justice to be served and for these criminals to get prosecuted. And, what some people are thinking, like, could it be that they're going to actually indict Obama before they indict anybody else?
I would love to see that. I tend to doubt it, knowing the way things work, but wouldn't it be wonderful?
Because we have the text between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok saying, POTUS wants to know everything that we're doing.
And the fact that he talked about Flynn, this just came out recently, that he talked about knowing about a conversation that Flynn had before they even talked to him.
Right.
So what does that tell you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then I don't think that this is all, the whole thing against Trump is really all Obama's brainchild. I think that he's a puppet. So who's
For sure.
like Obama what to do?
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing, politicians are front people. They take their orders. They get their money for their campaigns from the people who own them. And they not only own them financially, but they own them, like you said, they set up these blackmail videos. And Epstein was a big part of that. And, they get, it's either, pedophilia or it's the honey traps, with the women or men that are, putting these people in compromising positions so that they can be easily controlled. And that seems to be the method of choice out there and how they're able to keep the death cult in line, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. But the child pornography, the child sex stuff is the one that, because, it's not a big deal if you're gay anymore, and it's not the end of the world if you're having an affair anymore. So it's like if you're screwing a kid, that's not okay.
That's not okay in any way, shape, or form. And it's wonderful to see that so many of these pedophile networks are being busted, and probably more than the history of a country in the last 3 years.
Yes. More. Yeah. He's done more than every other, administration put together by far. And that's another thing that had emerged, is the human trafficking had supplanted drugs. It was actually making more money.
Mm-hmm.
You can reuse a human. I mean, once you snort all the drugs, they're gone. But you can keep on, humans keep on. They live, if you're not killing them.
Right. We've got another question from the chat here. Let's see. Douglas is asking, I'd bet that Fauci has a vaccine already known, but by only him and his close buddies, like, Gates, etc.
I've seen a lot of people speculate that, I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, they've got patents on these things, and so that this has been known for a long time, and we know, from what we've seen, this is a scenario that this is a scare tactic that they've been wanting to roll out for a long time. Fauci even said in 2017, this president will see a surprise outbreak of some kind of a virus. He said that in 2017. Yep,
he did.
I mean, come on, how obvious is it? And he's just a little puppet boy for Gates as well, and so is Birx. These people are all connected. They're all parts of the same organizations that Gates is funding.
I think that Gates is like a bloodliner guy, and he's multi-generational.
Yes.
Yes. Because like you see his his maternal grandfather was the director of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco's branch in Seattle.
Yeah.
So already right there, he was part of that whole central banking system, which is at the core of the controllers, who are behind all of this, the globalists who, there was another really great show that I ran. It was the SGT report, interviewing a British gold trader who was just like, he wanted to get to the bottom of why the gold prices were getting suppressed. Mm-hmm. And he ran into people who had been compromised by the Jeff Epstein operation. And then he began to understand that all major bank CEOs are blackmailed and compromised in the same way we've been talking about.
It wouldn't be surprising, right?
Right, and that these are subsidiaries of the central banking system.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this, it's like a hierarchical structure that goes all the way back to the top, which my friend tells me it's in Basel, Switzerland. It's the same people who run the Bank for International Settlements, which is the central bank of central banks.
Right. It seems to me banks used to be a lot more open about wielding their funds and throwing them around. But now it seems like they enlist the front people to do this, although they may be the source. But it's not the banks itself. You've got all these front people that are these created billionaires. You got Bezos, you got Musk and Gates out there. They're the ones that are doing all this stuff. And it was surprising to me to hear Elon Musk saying, that he was threatening to pull Tesla out of California if they keep this crap up. And
Yeah.
I love that. I don't like too much that he does, but that was good.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know how this is all going to play out, but apparently, the D class hasn't really I mean, we're just getting little dribs and drabs of the proverbial, the legendary D class that we've been hearing about for years now. And what's kind of amazing is how many cards Trump has held to his chest for so long. But it's like, do we really need to have global, catastrophe like this, economic death rattle?
Yeah.
Can he get back on the horse here? I mean, I'm sure he wants to get back up more than anyone.
Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of this, my take on it is that they're going to push a lot more of this out very close to the elections. And so it'll be fresh in people's minds. I think that's why there's been so much hesitation. If they pull everything out now and they push it for a couple months, it's easy to kind of stuff that back. People's memories are typically very short, and I think a lot of it might get lost if they don't push it out right in front of the
That's why
election.
Danger of maybe a more virulent strain being released.
Yeah, and that's the other thing they threaten about that. And I just think, and I know some people disagree with me on this, but I really think that a lot of what we're seeing is radiation poisoning from these, they've made this gigantic push to get all these 5G towers installed. Mm-hmm. And frankly, it's true that 5G has been around a long time, not using the deadliest frequencies. But I am convinced that these towers can be tuned to different frequencies. And we know that the military has developed EMF weaponry, for crowd control and different things like that they can utilize with certain frequencies will absolutely make people feel like their skin's on fire and they'll run.
Oh, yeah. The, what's it called? Active denial systems.
Yes, yes. And
it's the same exact millimeter wave, frequency. Yes. Range.
And if we get to 60 gigahertz, that's where, oxygen cannot be absorbed by our red blood cells because of those frequencies. And it has the very similar symptoms to what this whole COVID thing, is about. So I'm a little concerned about that could be possible. People are saying that they're using lower frequencies with the 5G right now, and it's not, the millimeter waves that we're all concerned about. But my concern is that they can tune these things and roll it out and say, oh my gosh, now we've got a more virulent strain in September or October, and they're just going to kill off a whole bunch of people with radiation and blame it on the new pandemic coming back.
Mm-hmm. Scary.
It is.
It's got to get rid of the globalists somehow. That's who we're at war with.
Yeah, and I was saying earlier, we have to redefine batshit crazy now, because we thought we saw some of it before, but now we're seeing a whole new version of it. We've got another question. Brenda from Twitter is saying, do you think there is that it is interesting in New York? Cuomo posted about many who got the virus had stayed at home, and now he says there is a virus-related syndrome that is hitting kids. Just another reason to keep families in lockdown.
Yeah, well, it's studies. There was a woman in Italy who came out with a study about how there's a part of this virus that affects what's it called? It's an enzyme that is involved in the production of hemoglobin, and so what people are really dying of is oxygenation problems, right? Because the hemoglobin isn't working. And it happens, you get glycated hemoglobin is a process that basically happens with age. It happens to diabetics, and you heard about the diabetics being more prone to COVID-19. And what happens, like, the older you get, the more glycated that your hemoglobin becomes. And so that's what you find. It's really just people who are over 50 in New York is what they've really, once again, found. It's like the older you are, the more glycated your hemoglobin is, and the more at risk to COVID-19 that you are. Period.
Oops.
And so there's that. And so that's what he was saying. That's what Cuomo said. And so then, that not being good enough, it's playing into the stage 2 of the rollout of this UN or WHO plan to, take your kids away from you. And again, that's part of the whole child trafficking thing.
Yeah, that's
what happens. When they take kids, that's what happens. They end up being trafficked, period. You don't want the state to take your child, period.
And they've got this new app they're pushing out, right, for the contact tracing. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is insane. This is absolutely. I mean, I have no words for it. It's so far beyond anything that's rational in any way, shape, or form. And they're going to roll it out apparently in Ventura County, California. So they're going to have an app. If you've tested positive, for the COVID, which their testing isn't even valid, so it's the mistake starts there. But then if whoever you're going to be tracked, whoever you come in contact with, they're going to be called and say, did you realize you came in contact with so-and-so? And then they're going to call everybody else that they came in contact with. And then if they think that they're, somebody in your house or your kids may have been exposed, they're going to come to your house and they want to take your kids or
it's
just unbelievable.
You only have one bathroom, but they were saying, no, we won't do. It's just we're offering this. We're being nice. We're going to give you a free, motel room.
Oh yeah. Oh, these people are just unbelievable. And we cannot allow this crap to move forward.
I mean, I just hope that some people on the left are looking at this and saying, no, this is not what I want.
I hope so, because they've gone so far
like
beyond.
A right finger to be like shocked and not wanting this,
Yeah, and with regard to forced vaccinations, what happened to my body, my choice?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, your body, your choice when it comes to abortion, but anything else, okay, we can just go ahead and do whatever we want to you. It's just mass insanity that we have going on here. I don't know how else to describe it. And we just can't tolerate this crap. People have got to stand up, and they are. I love seeing in Huntington Beach, they're closing the beach, and then the next day there are thousands of people show up, go to the beach. Like that's what people aren't getting. Some people are getting it, but we outnumber them so severely. They can't arrest us all.
Yeah.
And, if we just, disobey basically these unconstitutional things in large numbers, there's really not much they're going to be able to do about it. And I love seeing that. And it's happening in different places. Some businesses are reopening, like the gal in Texas. And, she just got a lot of publicity. But there's many others, too. And that's a wonderful thing.
She got $500,000.
Did she really?
Yes. I think she was pretty surprised, but yeah, she raised $500,000. She didn't even need it. I guess.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Other people, she got a car. Somebody gave her a car, separately from that. It's just crazy.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear. Well, she deserved it for, taking a stand for all of us, right? Anyway, Alexandra, we're coming up on our final break here before the last segment. So you're listening to Inside the Matrix with our special guest, Alexandra Bruce. Stick around with us. We'll be back in just a little bit. All right, welcome back, everybody, to our final segment of Inside the Matrix today here with Alexandra Bruce. One thing I wanted to cover too is that the bad guys are really they're killing a lot of birds with a single stone here, so to speak. And one of those is financial problems. Now the Fed has been pumping in trillions of dollars into the stock market, and like a drunken sailor. And totally propping up. So if anybody thinks that the economy has recovered back to, somewhat close to, where the Dow was before all this nonsense started, it's not true, because the Fed has been pumping in trillions and trillions of dollars into the stock market. Otherwise, it'd probably be down 40-50% easily over what's happened. And they don't want people to feel like, this crash is taking place, but there very definitely is. And then there's another scenario that I recently became aware of, and I'd ask everybody to look into this, is there's a process called naked short selling on Wall Street. And apparently they've been able to siphon off trillions of dollars. These are like the Lehman Brothers and the Merrill Lynch's and the Goldman Sachs and all these big houses. They've got some kind of scheme that uses naked short selling in order to, just siphon out a whole lot of money. So that's something that we definitely need to look into. But just be aware that the Fed is spending money like a drunken sailor and just pumping trillions of dollars into the economy because they have to at this point.
Yeah, and that's where your $1,200 check came from.
Yeah, well, that was a pittance of what they've been giving to the banks and the corporations, and right.
Oh yeah, but basically, it's the proverbial the $6 trillion stimulus package, which. The interesting thing about that, though, is that it involved folding the Fed into the Treasury using BlackRock to conduct the transactions. And using special purpose vehicles to do it.
Just like Enron.
See what that ends up being is because it's kind of a self-dealing thing. And so what it means is it's a way to make this $6 trillion loan without owing interest. That's really what that accomplishes. Mm-hmm.
No, but they use those same kind of Enron use those entities to to funnel money and do funny stuff too. That's why I mentioned it. But it's and if you look at the players in BlackRock and you look.
BlackRock is the Rothschild bank. I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like, really, we're going to give them the responsibility of handling this whole, trillions of dollars going out. It's just insane. And then, you've got Congress. They're already tipping their hand with so many of the different things that they want to do, like the digital currency that they tried to put in that first bill, didn't make it. But they're telling you what they want to do with all this stuff. And they're going to try and sneak all this crap into, every bill from now on.
Right. And so, the contact tracing is all about building out the Internet of Things. They need some real space. They need to, it's to populate their digital architecture with some real data, of people's movements. So. Oh, yeah. And they already pretty much have it, right, with our GPS and our phones. Yeah. But they're taking it to a higher degree, and of course, it's all only for our own good, Alexandra. This is for the goodness of the government, trying to help we the people, don't you think? Yeah, it's just the transhumanist thing, marches on. Yeah, that's how they march it out and parade it out to us and say, "Oh, this is for your own good, people. We just want to keep you alive while we take away all your rights and, make you sick with vaccines. So don't worry about it. It's all for your own good, right?"
It's disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't. They got to do something They got to do something. But it really does come down to us. We have to get engaged in our local governments because those are the ones that seem to have been really compromised.
We do.
There's a movement before, apparently at the county level. It seems to have been a little less messed with
Mm-hmm.
than at the gubernatorial and judicial levels that are out there and congressional levels. Because a lot of this is what you're seeing, this incredible sort of seditious behavior of our governors is these are basically Soros agents.
Absolutely. Bought and paid for.
And or fellow travelers. In the case of Gavin Newsom, it's like a multi-generational, these are seditious fraudsters who are selling out the country,
Pelosi's nephew, you mean?
Yes, exactly.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And it just goes on and on and on. But my guest last week, Dr. David Martin, he really put out a really good template letter that you can adapt and send out there. So I encourage a lot of people, go to davidmartin.world.
Yes, exactly. I ran a story about this, and he basically, he has the language.
Yes, he does.
The legal language that you need to challenge what's going on.
I sent out about a dozen letters using his template, and then I made a few of my own as well that weren't quite as nice. But yeah, these people need to know that we're not going to take this. So, if you can email your representatives, find that template letter, adapt it, because he's spelling out exactly what laws they're breaking, because they are absolutely breaking, besides our constitutional rights, they are actually breaking other laws as well. And he outlines those things. So yeah, that we, the people, it's up to us to maintain our freedom, because if we don't, we can see, and this has happened, over and over again, any place where, freedom tries to rear its beautiful head, there's the death cult will be there to try and take it away from us. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be responsible. We've got to push back. We've got to make our voices heard and know that they're not going to get away with this crap.
Indeed. But yeah, what he's saying is that it is a violation of the Sherman Act.
Right.
The Antitrust Act. Well, yeah, it's because, here they're creating the disease, they're offering you the solution. I mean, if this isn't a RICO case, if this isn't racketeering, what is?
Oh, yeah. And the Patriot Act, strangely enough. They're actually committing a terrorist act by compelling us to do something that goes against the Constitution. He explains that better than I did, but he explains how they're actually violating their own Patriot Act, which is great.
I love it.
So,
I
yeah.
never loved the Patriot Act until this moment when I heard that.
Right. There's nothing really good about it. Now, apparently, it was supposed to expire, I think, March 15th, but they put this stuff out before then, so they actually did violate it. I don't know if they have reauthorized it. I hope not, but I haven't really heard on that.
Mm-hmm. It's been wild. I ran the Dr. Judy Mikovits several interviews, and then the Plandemic movie, which was literally taken down as I was posting it.
Yeah, it got taken down from my channel as well, and removed unceremoniously. Yeah, we can't have that.
The Utah Gun Exchange has a non-censoring video sharing platform. The only thing is that the videos are, they shrink them down to almost, they're tiny. They're literally the size of a postage stamp.
Oh, wow.
So that's what's streaming on that page now. I repaired it. I replaced it with the Utah Gun Exchange file, and it's really small. It looks weird.
Well, at least you get to hear it.
It's perfect. The audio sounds.
Yeah. Well, as long as you can hear it, you'll get the message. But
right.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see people coming out with these videos, and like I said earlier, to see the police officers stepping up, to see the sheriff stepping up. this is what needs to happen. And we need to encourage these people. On one hand, we need to write our dissatisfaction to all these politicians who are overstepping their legal authority. But we also have to encourage those people that are speaking out. So send them your emails and say, hey, thank you, for speaking for we the people. Thank you for getting out there and doing what you do. We want to encourage them as well because we want more of that.
Indeed.
So, it's just always a question mark. And I think a lot of this is in flux. They're waiting to see what we're going to do as to how quickly or how long they stretch this out. As long as they don't get a sufficient amount of pushback, I think they are, in fact, going to try and drag this out as long as possible. So that's why, another reason why it's so important for us to say, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
This is not going to stand. We're not going to stand for this crap. And when enough of us step up, they're going to back down. They have to. They have no choice. And the fact that if you go on Bill Gates' Instagram account and read the comments, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, people are on to him, and he's, of course, the memes you've posted, you have the best. I don't know where you find them or if you make them, but the memes you post are so incredible.
Well, it's just, another high level member of the whole globalist cabal was Michael Bloomberg.
Mm-hmm.
And they trotted him out.
Not very long either, right?
He spent, they said $500 million. He spent $1 billion.
Oh my God.
I think he spent more than Hillary did. In 8 weeks or less.
Yeah, right. It was only a couple of months.
Yeah. And, but you see, it's the same. I just want people to compare him to Bill Gates. And that's the energy. It's they're almost as rich. I mean, he's worth $65 billion. Okay.
Yeah. Gates is worth now, I think, 500 billion or 400 billion, something like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't remember. No, he might be.
It recently doubled.
Okay. Right. So, they're made out of money, and that's a tell right there, too. It's it shows you that they're part of the people who control the money of the world. And so they are, and they're not free to do what they want. They have to follow their marching orders. So, absolutely. He was forced to go this is not your money. This is our money. And you're going to spend $1 billion trying to beat Donald Trump. And it was such a resounding failure that, a better look for him to really just quit because it's really so pathetic.
Oh, absolutely pathetic. And it was wonderful to see. He was so inept at those ridiculous.
Right. So he's just another person who was propped up. And in the same way, Bill Gates, people think that these guys are geniuses. They're not. They're just owned. Yeah. They're totally tools.
Yeah. And we see the same thing in the entertainment industry in Hollywood and all that. If you're in the death cult, you are always going to be beholden to the death cult. And when they tell you to jump, you will jump. Just like, when they had all these celebrities say, oh, I'm staying at home. I got corona.
Exactly.
Hilarious.
No, I'm moving to Canada because Trump is president. And you see them on Twitter, and it's what's great is that everyone gets it, and they're like, oh, you're talking about Donald Trump. I guess that means you're a pedophile then.
Yeah. It's wonderful to see people catching on.
What's his name? Meathead. He stopped tweeting.
Yeah.
Because it was always about Trump is, orange man bad. And everyone's like, oh, you're a pedophile. Check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I say to our friends out there who are digital warriors, pile it on, keep it coming, just call these people out for everything that you can think of. They've got their set of trolls who come after us, but we don't have to troll anybody. We just have to tell the truth. And it does the same thing. It accomplishes.
What I find is really interesting. The big pharma trolls are very often they're Canadian and they're Antifa. Wow. So they are totally, communists and anti-capitalists, and there they are shilling for big pharma. It's what?
like I said, the definition of batshit crazy has to be redone. So we've gone way past the Twilight Zone into I don't know what kind of zone it is, but it's way out there, some kind of black hole zone or something. I'm not sure what, but it's just so bonkers.
But at the same time, on a more positive note, I'm seeing a possibility of a world that's free of all of this, where they're gone. I can see it.
I like that vision.
It's never been like, it's horrible. It's terrible to be deplatformed, to have my ability to earn a living. They're trying to turn me into a homeless lady and all that. And they've been doing it for 5 years now. And it's been really sucky for me. But I've never been in a moment in my life where maybe we could be free of this death cult,
I love that thought. And I want everybody out there who's listening or who will listen to the archive, hold that thought that one day we'll be free of these death cult psychopaths, because they're, like we said, there's not that many of them, but we have to, as humans, as part of the human family, we have to get beyond being able to be bought.
Yeah.
We have to have a moral compass. And I don't know how we do that other than by raising our children that way.
This is an opportunity to do that, because we're all being many people are being forced not to be able to make a living, and they're being forced to see the other ways that value can be traded and what really matters at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
The relationships that are fundamental to survival in life, that are even more important than money.
Absolutely.
We sold this idea that money is, everything. And that's another thing. That's another one of the psyops that came out. I think it was early last week. Madonna and, a bunch of other, superstars owned blackmailed slaves. We're all saying, we don't want the world to go back to the way it was. It's like, yeah, tell that to a blue collar worker whose life is really screwed up right now. That's not.
Yeah.
It's not what they want to hear right now. But there is maybe something of value to that idea that it just isn't about conspicuous consumption and a bigger car and a bigger this and a bigger that,
Of course. And, this is a good time to reflect on a lot of that stuff. And we need to instill in our children these values, because ultimately they're going to have to carry it on. And I think in a lot of ways, our society has failed. It doesn't mean you have to be religious in any way, but you have to have a moral compass. The two aren't always synonymous, but we have to have a moral compass, and we have to, do no harm.
But sometimes
follow the golden rule, things like that.
It's really hard, especially if you've been screwed with, had your job taken away for no good reason. Like, my first comments when this first happened was like, okay, now the rest of the country knows what I've been going through for the past 5 years.
Mm.
But, it was just to have something as big as the deep state, like stepping on your neck, is tough to go through. And I got into a really bad space. Like, when you first called me, that was the first time that I decided to speak to somebody. I was just not going on any radio shows and talking to anybody. Because I was just, it was so overwhelming and so depressing that I just was in a massive funk. And so it kind of stayed with me. And as, it's just like, then it becomes a pattern. It becomes like an energetic pattern. So I did some distance healing with a woman in Chennai, India, of all things.
Wow.
Recommended to me by a friend. And in only 3 sessions, I swear, it was like tripping on acid, but without any toxicity or bad and out of control, but really just suddenly being totally omniscient and totally with God. It was unbelievable. And it stayed with me. And, I just needed a little help. So that's the other thing, is that maybe sometimes you need some help. As smart as you are and whatever, like, you're still, it's like something that's just become too overwhelming for you. And you need to know that you can get help.
Absolutely. Are you going to write about that?
I don't know if I should deluge this. She's a young woman, like in her early 30s in India.
Well, maybe you don't have to use her name, but just tell about your experience.
Everything has changed, and that's why I can actually see. I can see the other side. I can almost taste it. It's like it's real. The world without the death cult is a reality that is attainable.
I love that. I'm sticking with that. That's what I want. I'm gonna hold that in my heart. I think everybody out there is going to do the same. Yeah, that's what we want. We want a world like that.
In their thing, ultimately. I mean, it's just about walking away from them. It's about becoming self-sufficient. We can do it. I don't know what's going to happen. I think there's going to be some booms certainly in the next few weeks. It's going to be, unprecedented things are going to happen in American politics.
I hope so, because, this whole past year, has been more of a red pill, I think. And this recent scenario now, this is a huge red pill. So we have an opportunity to reach more people because people are at home. They're going to be looking for things. They're going to be looking for answers. And when they realize they're not going to get them on the mainstream news, they're going to pay attention to websites like yours, and they're going to go to forbiddenknowledgetv.net, and they're going to see what's going on. And this is going to help create that awareness that we need to move forward. And I really love that thought that, thinking about a world without these death cult psychopaths.
Right. And I think the reason they've been able to persist for so long is that there's nothing transparent about them. They weren't public. Nobody knew that the central banking system was like a total scam where they were just leeching off of us financially. Like if you could just, with the digitization of everything and with the transparency of the internet that's got them all crazy and trying to censor everybody now because, the quickening of consciousness is happening as a result of all that. It's just, we know when, businesses, everything they're so tightened up because of the digitization and everything that it's like they can't get away with this anymore. They can't scam us by getting something for nothing anymore.
Yeah, and if you ask the average person out there, about the central bank and how money is created, most people have no clue that these idiots have the money machine. They can create money out of thin air, and that's what we've got to put a stop to that. And that's one of the things I really like about Trump. He fully gets that. Kennedy got that, but they were able to get to him. And let's hope and pray that we don't have any more of that kind of thing going on. Let's back people that are out there speaking on our behalf and let them know that they're doing the right thing. Alexandra, thank you so much for being on the show once again, and we're obviously hoping to have you on regularly because your perspective is great, and we so appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to the next time.
All right, everybody out there, stay safe, become digital warriors, and do the best you can to share with friends and family. We need enough of us to stand up. So you've been listening to Inside the Matrix. Until next week, take care, everybody. We'll see you then.
This is Inside the Matrix, hosted by Jimmy Brent.
Who are we talking about?
Jimmy Brent. Live every Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
It is worldwide.
Broadcasting from an undisclosed location deep within the neon capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. For more information on the host and the show, please visit InsideTheMatrix.org. That's InsideTheMatrix.org. It's time to break the chains of manipulated consciousness and claim our true nature as creative, divine beings. Inside the Matrix. Inside the Matrix.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.